and welcome to Book Nook. My name is Bethany Kinder, and I'm the Communications and Development Director at Read Aloud, West Virginia. Joining me today is Mr. Howard Seufer, who's an attorney at Bowles Rice in Charleston. Welcome, Howard.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Howard is extremely involved in the Charleston community and has recently been named one of West Virginia Executive Magazine's sharpshooters, and congratulations on that incredible honor.
Thank you.
He is also a Read Aloud volunteer, and we are so excited to have him today. Now, the first thing I want to ask you is a little bit about how reading has been impactful in your life, and as far as your success goes, how reading has mattered in that sense.
Reading has been a part of my life from as far back as I can remember. I come from a large family. There's 6 children, and my mother would read to all of us almost every night, and we would have to gather around in the living room, and sometimes it was a story that was finished in one reading. Other times it was a chapter book, and we sometimes couldn't wait till the next time we got together. And we ranged in age. It was a 10-year age range of the 6 children. There were times we read scary stories, and we'd turn the lights off and just light some candles, and holiday stories and things. So I had that background in reading. And then, of course, going to school, we read a lot of books. I practiced law, and lawyers read a lot. Hundreds of pages a day sometimes. And I often pause and wonder what it would be like to be a lawyer if you didn't enjoy reading or if you didn't have good reading skills. So I use them all the time.
Absolutely. Well, it's wonderful that you had an experience where reading was enriched in your life. So how has that impacted the way that you have exposed your children to reading?
Well, it's interesting. As a Read Aloud volunteer, I have a large collection of books at home to choose from because both of my daughters, one of whom just graduated from WVU with a master's degree, is going to become a teacher, and the other graduated a number of years ago and has my 2 grandchildren. They read as they grew up, and we read to them. And I find these books, and they'll have little things they've written in them as they read through them, or places where they stuck things into them, and it reminds me just how big a part of their lives it was. One of my favorite things was to not know where one of my daughters was, and to go upstairs, and they'd be lying on the back of the bed with a book like this hanging over the edge, and it's like nothing. They couldn't. It blocked everything else out. They were lost in their books. So it was a big part of their growing up, and I'm reminded of that every time I see the books.
Absolutely. What a wonderful story. Now tell me a little bit about how being a volunteer for Read Aloud West Virginia has impacted your life.
Reading aloud, and I read at Mrs. Jackson's 3rd grade classroom at Mary C. Snow, is the highlight of my week. No matter how stressful my work week may be, and sometimes it is for lawyers, you got deadlines and you have to get things just right, and people don't always agree. It can be very contentious. When I get in my car and drive 5 minutes over to Mary C. Snow in Charleston, it's like entering a different world. I notice my heart rate goes down. I'm more calm. I go into the classroom, and I leave there just ready to tackle the rest of the week. The 3rd grade students I read to are fantastic. They really are. They pay attention. They ask questions. Sometimes it's hard to get through a page of a book if it's an interesting one. They have things to say. And I learn something every time they do. I'll never forget the time I went to read a book about Ivan. He's a gorilla that lives in a cage in a shopping mall, and it's supposed to be an attraction for people to come there. And the author of the book says, be sure the kids know these words before you start. Usually there's not a glossary in kids' books. But they had silverback for the ape and other words that would come up. One of them was domain, because in the book, whenever she was referring to the boundaries of the cage where Ivan is kept, she'd say that was his domain, or he left his domain. And so we were going down this list of words, and I said, does anybody know what domain is? And I thought if anybody did, they might say it's internet address or something. Sure. This little girl raised her hand without even thinking, and I said, what? And she said, it's MySpace. And I thought, I could never have come up with such a concise and appropriate definition. And from that time forward, I've paid attention. And the selfish side of me, what do I get out of reading aloud? I have such confidence in the future of our country and our community, knowing that these kids are going to grow up to be our leaders and our neighbors and the citizens who make decisions, because they're bright, they're interested, and it's amazing. It amazes me every time I'm there, the reactions I get from the kids.
What a great story. Now, I can imagine that you would encourage others to read as Read Aloud volunteers.
Absolutely. I think you'd have the same experience, well, you know you would, as I've had. And even if you can't do it as a Read Aloud volunteer, to look for opportunities to read to children, your own children, your grandchildren, the neighbor's children. You can have that same experience. And at the same time, you're implanting in that little mind the benefits of reading, the imaginations that kids develop because they're not watching a video or a movie and don't see what everybody looks like and what they're doing. It's just, I think it's a win-win for everybody involved. I would encourage anyone to do it. It's so easy to do. The schools love you when you're there. You're not a stranger. They welcome you. They embrace you. Come on in. The kids appreciate it, and I guarantee you, you'll leave every session on a high.
Very well said. Now, Mr. Seufer, why don't you introduce the first book that you're going to read to our audience today?
Well, our first book is for younger kids, but I think older kids might be interested. It's Blueberries for Sal, and it's a book about Sal who follows Mom out into the hills where she's picking blueberries, and they have an interesting experience while they're there.
Absolutely. Well, we are so excited to hear this, and we want to thank you all so much for tuning in, and stay tuned for Mr. Seufer to read to you all.
Blueberries for Sal. This is by Robert McCloskey, and it's interesting because you'll notice this book doesn't say illustrator. It just says by Robert McCloskey because he illustrated it too. Mr. McCloskey wrote this book 70 years ago, back in 1948. But it's still a book we read today, and that's what I'm going to do right now. You can tell from the pictures that the kitchen's rather antiquated, so it is an old book. Blueberries for Sal. One day, little Sal went with her mother to Blueberry Hill to pick blueberries. Little Sal brought along her small tin pail, and her mother brought her large tin pail to put berries in. "We will take our berries home and can them," said her mother. "Then we will have food for the winter." Little Sal picked 3 berries and dropped them in her little tin pail. Kaplink, kaplank, kaplunk. She picked 3 more berries and ate them. Then she picked more berries and dropped one in the pail. Kaplunk. And the rest she ate. Then little Sal ate all 4 blueberries out of her pail. Her mother walked slowly through the bushes, picking blueberries as she went and putting them in her pail. And little Sal struggled along behind, picking blueberries and eating every single one. Little Sal hurried ahead and dropped a blueberry in her mother's pail. It didn't sound kaplink because the bottom of the pail was already covered with berries. She reached down inside to get her berry back. Though she really didn't mean to, she pulled out a large handful because there were so many blueberries right up close to the one she had put in. Her mother stopped picking and said, "Now, Sal, you run along and pick your own berries. Mother wants to take her berries home and can them for next winter." Her mother went back to her picking, but little Sal, because her feet were tired of standing and walking, sat down in the middle of a large clump of bushes and ate blueberries. On the other side of Blueberry Hill, Little Bear came with his mother to eat blueberries. "Little Bear," she said, "eat lots of berries and grow big and fat. We must store up food for the long, cold winter." Little Bear followed behind his mother as she walked slowly through the bushes eating berries, and Little Bear stopped now and then to eat berries. Then he had to hustle along to catch up. Because his feet were tired of hustling, he picked out a large clump of bushes and sat down right in the middle and ate blueberries. Over on the other side of the hill, little Sal ate all of the berries she could reach from where she was sitting. Then she started out to find her mother. She heard a noise from around a rock and thought, "That's my mother walking along." But it was a mother crow and her children, and they stopped eating berries and flew away, saying, "Caw, caw, caw." Then she heard another noise in the bushes and thought, "That is surely my mother, and I will go that way." But it was little bear's mother instead. Aha! She was tramping along, eating berries and thinking about storing up food for the winter, and little Sal tramped right along behind. By this time, Little Bear had eaten all the berries he could reach without moving from his clump of bushes. Then he hustled off to catch up with his mother. He hunted and hunted, but his mother was nowhere to be seen. He heard a noise from over a stump and thought, "That is my mother walking along." But it was a mother partridge and her children. They stopped eating berries and hurried away. Then he heard a noise in the bushes and thought, "That is surely my mother. I will hustle that way." But it was little Sal's mother instead. She was walking along picking berries and thinking about canning them for next winter. Little Bear hustled right along behind. Little Bear and little Sal's mother, and little Sal and little Bear's mother were all mixed up with each other among the blueberries on Blueberry Hill. Little Bear's mother heard Sal walking along behind and thought it was Little Bear. And she said, "Little Bear, munch, munch, eat all you gulp can possibly hold, swallow." Little Sal said nothing. She picked 3 berries and dropped them kaplink, kaplank, kaplunk in her small tin pail. Little Bear's mother turned around to see what on earth could make a noise like kaplunk. "Grump!" she cried, choking on a mouthful of berries. "This is not my child. Where is Little Bear?" She took one good look and backed away. She was old enough to be shy of people, even a very small person like little Sal. Then she turned around and walked off very fast to hunt for Little Bear. Little Sal's mother heard Little Bear tramping along behind and thought it was little Sal. She kept right on picking and thinking about canning blueberries for next winter. Little Bear padded up and peeked into her pail. Of course, he only wanted to taste a few of what was inside, but there were so many and they were so close together that he tasted a tremendous mouthful by mistake. "Now, Sal," said little Sal's mother without turning around, "you run along and pick your own berries. Mother wants to can these for next winter." Little Bear tasted another tremendous mouthful and almost spilled the entire pail of blueberries. Little Sal's mother turned around and gasped, "My goodness, you are not little Sal. Where is my child?" Little Bear just sat munching and swallowing and licking his lips. Little Sal's mother slowly backed away. She was old enough to be shy of bears, even very small bears like Little Bear. Then she turned around and walked away quickly to look for little Sal. She hadn't gone very far before she heard a kaplink, kaplank, kaplunk. She knew just what made that kind of a noise. Little Bear's mother had not hunted very long before she heard a hustling sound that stopped now and then to munch and swallow. She knew just what made that kind of a noise. Little Bear and his mother went down one side of Blueberry Hill, eating blueberries all the way, and full of food stored up for next winter. And little Sal and her mother went down the other side of Blueberry Hill, picking berries all the way, and drove home with food to can for next winter, a whole pail of blueberries and 3 more besides. And that's the end of the story. You can see the mother is there canning the blueberries in her kitchen. She puts them in those glass jars and puts lids on them, and then they save them and they get to eat the berries in the wintertime. So that's Blueberries for Sal. The next book is a different book. This is Philippe in Monet's Garden. It's a book by Jobe Carmack, and it's illustrated by another person, Lisa Canny Chasseau. This is a book that's published by the Art Museum in Massachusetts, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. It's a pretty cover. At the very back of the book, it tells us a little bit about Monet, because remember, the title is Philippe in Monet's Garden. And if you don't know about Monet, it says Claude Monet was a famous painter who lived more than 100 years ago. He lived in France, in a country town. He loved bright colors, so he planted many different kinds of flowers in his garden. He dug a pond and filled it with water so that he could paint the sky and trees reflected there. Monet planted beautiful water lilies in the pond. Their leaves floated on the water, and yellow, pink, and white flowers bloomed on top of the leaves. Monet loved to paint with his bright colors, too. He painted pictures of the water lilies in his pond by dabbing bits of color side by side. When you stand back, you can see the shape of a flower. But when you look close, you see strokes of paint. Look how Monet used blue and purple and pink and yellow and green. So this is about Claude Monet, the artist, or at least he shows up in this story. So let's go back to the beginning of the book and see how that happens. Because remember, this is a story about a frog named Philippe. Philippe in Monet's garden. In the city of Paris, as everyone knows, frog legs are eaten, except for the toes. They are buttered and baked and sometimes fried, and the bigger the better is always the guide. A train ride away in the French countryside lived a frog named Philippe with a marvelous stride. He got his name because of his leap, which was the biggest and grandest, just like the feet. Philippe liked to play in his pond every day, and he tried not to mind when his friends were unkind. Tee, ha, ha, you're a dumb-looking frog, they teased the unhappy Philippe. Your thighs are too long, your shape is all wrong, you can't be our friend, you just don't belong. The frog catcher crept with his big trusty net as they bullied Philippe and made fun of his feet. Oh no, it's not fair, they cried in despair. Philippe in your net is far better bet. Big feet or not, I haven't been caught. These legs won't be buttered and baked or fried. But as for you, well, I bid you goodbye. Leap, leap, Philippe, he heard the sheep bleat, and he kept on hopping. There was no time for stopping as he made his escape from a gruesome fate. Just when Philippe was all out of leap, he came to the gate of the Monet estate. And reading the sign, which suited him fine, he begged Monet's pardon and entered the garden. And you'll notice the garden has a sign on it that says, "No frog hunting." Oh my, what a size! I can't believe my eyes, exclaimed the painter Monet. What a physique! Those legs are très magnifique. You're the perfect addition to my garden, not my kitchen. Monet showed him the pond of which he was fond, where he painted the light between daybreak and night. And as for Philippe, there were bugs of all kinds, green ones and pink ones, on which he could dine. So Philippe found a home to call his own, and Monet added some green to his painterly scene. The end. Seems like all our books today are about animals. And this one is Sylvester and the Magic Pebble by William Steig. And it's published by Aladdin Paperbacks. It doesn't tell us who the illustrator is, so perhaps Mr. Steig is the illustrator. Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. Sylvester Duncan lived with his mother and father at Acorn Road in Oatsdale. One of his hobbies was collecting pebbles of unusual shape and color. On a rainy Saturday during vacation, he found a quite extraordinary one. It was flaming red, shiny, and perfectly round like a marble. As he was studying this remarkable pebble, he began to shiver, probably from excitement, and the rain felt cold on his back. "I wish it would stop raining," he said. To his great surprise, the rain stopped. It didn't stop gradually, as rains usually do. It ceased. The drops vanished on the way down. The clouds disappeared. Everything was dry, and the sun was shining as if rain had never existed. In all his young life, Sylvester had never had a wish gratified so quickly. It struck him that magic must be at work, and he guessed that the magic must be in the remarkable-looking red pebble, where indeed it was. To make a test, he put the pebble on the ground and said, "I wish it would rain again." Nothing happened. But when he said the same thing holding the pebble in his hoof, the sky turned black, there was lightning and a clap of thunder, and the rain came shooting down. "What a lucky day this is," thought Sylvester. "From now on, I can have anything I want. My father and mother can have anything they want. My relatives, my friends, and anybody at all can have everything anybody wants." He wished the sunshine back in the sky, and he wished a wart on his left hind fetlock would disappear, and it did. And he started home, eager to amaze his father and mother with his magic pebble. He could hardly wait to see their faces. Maybe they wouldn't even believe him at first. As he was crossing Strawberry Hill, thinking of some of the many, many things he could wish for, he was startled to see a mean, hungry lion looking right at him from behind some tall grass. He was frightened. If he hadn't been so frightened, he would have made the lion disappear, or he could have wished himself safe at home with his father and mother. He could have wished the lion would turn into a butterfly or a daisy or a gnat. He could have wished many things, but he panicked and couldn't think carefully. "I wish I were a rock," he said, and he became a rock. The lion came bounding over, sniffed the rock 100 times, walked around and around it, and went away confused, perplexed, puzzled, and bewildered. "I saw that little donkey as clear as day. Maybe I'm going crazy," he muttered. And there was Sylvester, a rock on Strawberry Hill, with the magic pebble lying right beside him on the ground, and he was unable to pick it up. "Oh, how I wish I were myself again," he thought, but nothing happened. He had to be touching the pebble to make the magic work. But there was nothing he could do about it. His thoughts began to race like mad. He was scared and worried. Being helpless, he felt hopeless. He imagined all the possibilities, and eventually he realized that his only chance of becoming himself again was for someone to find the red pebble and to wish that the rock next to it would be a donkey. Now, someone would surely find the red pebble. It was so bright and shiny. But what on earth would make them wish that a rock were a donkey? The chance was 1 in a billion at best. Sylvester fell asleep. What else could he do? Night came with many stars. Meanwhile, back at home, Mr. and Mrs. Duncan paced the floor, frantic with worry. Sylvester had never come home later than dinner time. Where could he be? They stayed up all night worrying what had happened, expecting that Sylvester would surely turn up by morning. But he didn't, of course. Mrs. Duncan cried a lot, and Mr. Duncan did his best to soothe her. Both longed to have their dear son with them. "I will never scold Sylvester again as long as I live," said Mrs. Duncan, "no matter what he does." At dawn, they went about inquiring of all the neighbors. They talked to all the children, the puppies, the kittens, the colts, the piglets. No one had seen Sylvester since the day before yesterday. They went to the police. The police could not find their child. All the dogs in Oakdale went searching for him. They sniffed behind every rock and tree and blade of grass, into every nook and gully of the neighborhood and beyond, but found not a scent of him. They sniffed the rock on Strawberry Hill, but it smelled like a rock. It didn't smell like Sylvester. After a month of searching the same places over and over again, and inquiring of the same animals over and over again, Mr. and Mrs. Duncan no longer knew what to do. They concluded that something dreadful must have happened and that they would probably never see their son again, though all the time he was less than a mile away. They tried their best to be happy, to go about their usual ways, but their usual ways included Sylvester, and they were always reminded of him. They were miserable. Life had no meaning for them anymore. Night followed day, and day followed night over and over again. Sylvester on the hill woke up less and less often. When he was awake, he was only hopeless and unhappy. He felt he would be a rock forever, and he tried to get used to it. He went into an endless sleep. The days grew colder. Fall came with the leaves changing color. Then the leaves fell, and the grass bent on the ground. Then it was winter. The winds blew this way and that. It snowed. Mostly the animals stayed indoors, living on the food they had stored up. One day a wolf sat on the rock that was Sylvester and howled because he was hungry. Then the snow melted. The earth warmed up in the spring sun, and things budded. Leaves were on the trees again. Flowers showed their young faces. One day in May, Mr. Duncan insisted that his wife go with him on a picnic. "Let's cheer up," he said. "Let's try to live again and be happy, even though Sylvester, our angel, is no longer with us." They went to Strawberry Hill. Mrs. Duncan sat down on the rock. The warmth of his own mother sitting on him woke Sylvester up from his deep winter sleep. Now he wanted to shout, "Mother, Father, it's me, Sylvester, I'm right here." But he couldn't talk. He had no voice. He was stone silent. Mr. Duncan walked aimlessly about while Mrs. Duncan set out the picnic food on the rock: alfalfa sandwiches, pickled oats, sassafras salad, Timothy compote. Suddenly, Mr. Duncan saw the red pebble. "What a fantastic pebble!" he exclaimed. Sylvester would have loved it for his collection. He put the pebble on the rock. They sat down to eat. Sylvester was now as wide awake as a donkey that was a rock could possibly be. Mrs. Duncan felt some mysterious excitement. "You know, Father," she said suddenly, "I have the strangest feeling that our dear Sylvester is still alive and not far away." I am, Sylvester wanted to shout, but he couldn't. If only he had realized that the pebble resting on his back was the magic pebble. See, it's right on him. The pebble's sitting on him. "Oh, how I wish he were here with us on this lovely May day," said Mrs. Duncan. Mr. Duncan looked sadly at the ground. "Don't you wish it too, Father?" she said. He looked at her as if to say, "How can you ask such a question?" Mr. and Mrs. Duncan looked at each other with great sorrow. "I wish I were myself again. I wish I were my real self again," thought Sylvester, and in less than an instant he was. You can imagine the scene that followed: the embraces, the kisses, the questions, the answers, the loving looks, and the fond exclamations. When they had eventually calmed down a bit and had gotten home, Mr. Duncan put the magic pebble in an iron safe. Someday they might want to use it, but really for now, what more could they wish for? They all had all that they wanted. And that's the end of Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. Pretty good book. So we've had 3 books here talking about animals, and the animals sound a lot like people, which is why I like reading books that have animals in them. We can sometimes think of people we know, our parents, children, friends, and we kind of see them in some of these animals and the way that they react. I've really enjoyed reading here today, like I enjoy reading at Mary C. Snow's school every Tuesday morning. And I encourage those of you who are interested in doing that or might be interested to follow up with Read Aloud West Virginia and volunteer your time. I guarantee you it'll be a great experience.